All the participants are requested to switch off your camera.
माझ्या अडवायला इकडनं मागून घे मंदेश असं स्क्रीनचा Okay. Good morning to all of you. This is Dr. U.M. Deshmukh from Chhatrapati Shahu Institute of Business Education and Research, Kolhapur. I welcome all the participants for second day of this 5-day online faculty development program on student-centered teaching learning methods in higher education, which is organized by C Cyber Kolhapur with Atal Academy during 5th January 21 to 9 January 21. Today we have with us Dr. M.M. Ali, speaker for today's first session, and the topic of his session is teaching strategies to facilitate active learning. Now, without wasting time, let me introduce Dr. M.M. Ali for today's session. So far as his details, academic details, research details are concerned, they are too long, but I will try my level best to brief his details before you. Dr. M.M. Ali is presently working as a director in Vasantdada Patil Institute of Management Studies and Research, Mirrors. He has formerly been director of C Cyber Kolhapur. He has 37 years of wide range experience of teaching, research, consulting, and academic administration at the institute. He has a vast research guidance experience wherein 51 research scholars have been awarded PhD under his guidance, and 102 research scholars have been awarded MPhil degree. He is an external referee for various universities in India. So far as research projects are concerned, He has successfully completed 12 research projects funded by various research agencies in India. His research work has appeared in various national and international journals by his publications. He is also a life member of 10 reputed bodies and institutions. He is on the editorial board of various journals. So far as teaching and research is concerned, he has been recognized for his excellence teaching and research in cyber and also outside cyber. He has been consistently rated as the best teacher throughout his career at cyber. He is active in inculcating new ideas, thoughts among his friends, fellow teachers, research scholars through various forms. He has delivered more than 300 sessions at state, national, and international conferences and seminars. He has held various administrative and academic responsibilities at institute as well as university level. As I had mentioned in the beginning that so far as biodata is concerned is too long, but I tried my level best to brief his details, academic as well as research before you. Now, without wasting time, now I request Dr. M.M. Ali to deliver his session on teaching strategies to facilitate active learning. Dr. M.M. Ali, sir.
Yes, good. Thank you, Dr. Deshmukh, sir, for a very nice introduction that you have given.
It's my pleasure, sir.
But at the same time, you have thrown a challenge at me by highlighting the huge biodata of me with all the credentials. So obviously, the expectations of the listeners must be that who is this personality, and expectations of listening to my session must have gone up. However, I will try to make the discussion and share my experience of last 37 years in the academics, and see to it that whatever the topic that has been given to me, I would share my experiences, and at the end that we will have clarification on this as usual. So before I start, I'm thankful to the Cyber Trust Management for giving me this opportunity to have this webinar talk before the participants. And before I come to the point and start, let me tell you that today's talk I have organized on 3 different aspects. These 3 different aspects are, I would like to raise 3 different questions and get an answer to these 3 different questions. Our question number 1 is to know as to where we are, as we are talking about teaching strategies in higher education. So we should first of all know as to where we are, where we stand at present. Then once we answer this question, I would address as to where do we want to go. And then once this is answered, how to reach where we want to go. So this would be the scope of my talk for today's session. Okay, so before I say that where do we want to go, let me tell you that when we talk about the higher education and delivering a quality higher education, trying to develop a full personality, maybe we need to look into certain important aspects. What are those? That I will come to it within a short while of time. Basically, the quality of the nation is reflected by the quality of its citizens. The quality of the citizens is reflected by the quality of the education, what he or she possesses or they might have acquired. And finally, the quality of education is reflected by the quality of the teacher. I repeat, quality of the nation is reflected by the quality of the citizens. The quality of the citizens in turn is reflected by the quality of education, and finally the quality of education is reflected by the quality of the teacher. The point to convey here is the teacher is the main epic center for this higher education to make it a qualitative one, right? So the role of a teacher in making the nation, building the nation, is very crucial. So we start with, as to first of all, to know where we stand in terms of the higher education, where we are. The scenario of higher education in India has certain facts and figures, and these facts and figures are as per the survey of higher education, AISHE, All India Survey of Higher Education. They have given some facts and figures that I would like to put before all my participant friends. So when we see the status of the Indian higher education scenario, what do we find is the number of universities, almost we are approaching towards 1,000 universities. Exactly speaking, it is 993 universities in our country, with 39,931 colleges and 10,725 stand-alone institutes. This is the status of the universities, colleges, and institutes. Then the total enrollment in all these institutions work out to 37.4 million students. Out of this 37.4, maybe nearly it is coming to 50% sharing between the gents and the ladies, 19.2 and 18.2 respectively. The gross enrollment ratio of our country, that is from the primary, secondary to higher education enrollment, is 26.3%. Of course, this is our figure of gross enrollment, 26.3. But if you see the gross enrollment ratio of Canada, USA, and Australia, it is about 80%. And the top ranking in the world is Canada, 88% is the gross ratio. Similarly, 16.3% of the colleges enroll less than 100 students. And 4% of the colleges in this country have the student strength of more than 3,000 students. 2.5% colleges run the PhD program, along with, of course, other programs also. But basically, PhD programs, 2.5% of the colleges. And 35% of the colleges have the postgraduate programs. And the total teachers to impart this higher education is 14 lakhs, 16,299 teachers all over India. The PhDs that we produce every year in our country is 40,813 students every year, the PhD output. Of this, 23,765 are the males, rest are the females. Another striking point about the higher education, colleges and the universities in our country is 60.5% of the colleges are located in the rural areas. Similarly, 394 universities are again located in rural areas. This is the picture of the higher education status scenario in India. Now with this, maybe there are certain pros and cons that has occurred. So let us try to unfold these pros and cons one by one by taking into consideration, maybe the first thing is what I call it as quality concerns. So what are these quality concerns with respect to this higher education scenario? The first of all, the quality concern is the chronic shortage of the faculty in this country. And to add fuel to the fire, apart from this chronic shortage of the faculty, we have 35% of the positions unfilled. They are lying vacant, they are not being filled up. Whatsoever is the reasons, we will not go into that. Graduates, the graduates which we are churning out every year. Now these graduates have unfortunately a very low employability situation. And 25% of these graduates with this low employability are jobless. Okay. Now what about those graduates who have qualified or who have passed out? There again, we find some mind-boggling figures, and these mind-boggling figures related to the engineering graduates. For your information, 80% of the engineering graduates are unemployable. Similarly, 90% of the humanities graduates, they are also unemployable. Similarly, 3% of so-called software engineers, they have suitable skills. Only 3% of the software engineers have suitable skills to be employed. So this is the status of unemployability. But let me tell you, there is no dearth of jobs in this country. The industries are starving for talent, but unfortunately, the talent is missing because of maybe some reasons. We will not go into those details, but this is the present situation of the graduates and the faculty members. Similarly, we have at the national level one of the council which keeps on accrediting and doing the assessment of the various colleges. So this NAAC accreditation reflects that 90% of the colleges what they have assessed and 70% of the universities they have rated as poor quality. 90% of the colleges and 70% of the universities in this country have been rated as poor quality by the NAAC. Most universities, another issue regarding quality concern, most of the universities' curricula is changed, revised, maybe once in 5 years to 10 years. No wonder if I say there are some of the universities, but maybe for 10 to 15 years, we have not changed the curriculum or the syllabi, or nor have ever given a thought as to what we should do or what is the expectation of the students, what does the industry want. Such questions have not been asked, and maybe somewhere between 5 to 10 years, the universities keep on changing the syllabi and the curriculum is being changed. Similarly, the today's student and the industry expects multi-skilling. So in order to have a multi-skilling, we cannot think of one particular discipline and then see that the student goes into one particular stream and till the end he would be skillful only and only in one aspect. So therefore, what has happened in this process, that there is a dearth of interdisciplinary courses. You please take a review and see as to how many colleges have launched the interdisciplinary courses. There are hardly any colleges, so therefore there is a dearth of interdisciplinary courses in this country. And if we compare ourselves, Asian countries with the European countries, and why these European countries are rated high in terms of creating knowledge, we are very good at disseminating the knowledge, but the European countries and the universities in Europe are very good developers of knowledge, and that knowledge we are trying to impart to the students. So therefore, in India, unfortunately, I would say that there is a wide gap or there is a separation between research and teaching. Both these two activities are isolated and they are put in watertight compartments. We never bring the research to the classroom teaching, but this does not happen in the developed countries. Similarly, the industry and institute are being separated. We never approach the industry and try to take the feedback as to what is their expectation and what applied research that we should carry out so that they could implement it and then the quality would enhance. This, we hardly give a thought to this, and therefore all the research that is being carried out in this country and all the teaching that is being done, it is being done in a very isolated manner. These are some of the issues regarding the quality concern. Now coming to some of the major problems out of these two aspects, that we find that the students, the graduates, what we are preparing, what is our modus operandi of these graduates preparation? We give the curriculum, we teach them, we make them rehearse, memorize it, and then we finally test their memory at the end of the year by asking some questions by which they try to prove that what is their memory strength, and finally they give out the answers. And on the basis of this memory test, we award the percentages and the marks or the grades to them, wherein we have failed drastically in terms of emphasizing on the development of their cognitive skills and learning outcomes. I don't think there are hardly where you can count on the fingertips that the universities wherein that the curriculum is given with the program outcomes, with the curriculum outcome or with the course outcome. Nowhere you will find hardly anywhere that this emphasis is given on the development of the cognitive skills of the student, and they develop or design the curriculum which is based on the program outcomes. This is a missing link in our teaching pedagogy. Then there is a rigid separation of disciplines, unfortunately. Very rigid separation of disciplines. Now in terms of these disciplines, I am from the commerce stream. I will see to it that nobody tries to encroach upon my discipline so that tomorrow maybe I have a threat for my existence or survival. And this is what some of the so-called senior faculty members have an attitude not to allow anybody to encroach upon one's discipline. So therefore, maybe for the last 50 years that we have arts, commerce, science stream. So the person who is graduated would go for the post-graduation only and only if he is in that, belongs to that particular discipline. So this is the rigid separation of all the disciplines has made us to failed in to develop multidisciplinary courses. Then we talk about in this 21st century era, the UGC, the NAC, all these controlling authorities talk about that yes, we should give the autonomy to the institutions, we should give the autonomy to the teachers so as to bring out their innovative ideas. But what extent the autonomy is given? I would say very limited autonomy is being given to the teachers and the institutions to experiment with their ideas. Take a simple example. Any university that frames a curriculum, they put all the terms and conditions that how this particular program has to be taught, what you should do, do's and don'ts are stressed, and then the teacher has any freedom, the teacher has no liberty to adopt his or her ideas in order to make it a qualitative teaching. So therefore, the teachers or the institutions have not been given an autonomy so that the quality has hampered here. Similarly, the research activity. Now in terms of the research activity, though we talk about 30,000-40,000 PhDs are being produced every year, but whereas if you compare with the other countries, we are very small percentage in number. So the research activity is also lacking in our country, and this particular research activity is being considered as a separate isolated activity rather than juxtaposing it with the teaching fraternity. Then the lack of, okay, I am interested in doing a lot of research. Some of my friends are interested, but when it comes to funding these research projects, you hardly find any institutions coming forward to fund these research activities. Maybe earlier, the University Grants Commission used to fund for these research projects under minor research grant or the major research grant. Now, again, this also has been stopped, and they are taking a review and they're trying to take cognizance as to the past funds that we have released, how much has been utilized, and they are trying to recover back those unutilized funds. Now, this is one of the situation in terms, this is one of the major problem, I would say, that lack of funds for the research activity. Then similarly, that we have regulatory bodies in this country, and maybe two regulatory bodies are the major contributors in terms of regulating. and that is the University Grants Commission and the All India Council of Technical Education, AICT. So this again, now these two bodies are not very clear in their mind as to who has to play what role, and many a times we find that the authorities from these two bodies don't look eye to eye with each other. So there, there is a separation in terms, there is no proper integration again in these two controlling bodies, and this is the particular situation about, so to say, there is an ineffective regulatory system with regard to this higher education. And maybe last but not the least, the universities which are having affiliated colleges. There are large universities, and these universities are controlling hundreds and hundreds of colleges. Now you tell me, a university like Pune University or Bangalore University having hundreds and hundreds of colleges, how can you manage so many colleges? So obviously the quality will deter, and that is precisely what has happened with these universities having large number of affiliated colleges. So these are some of these things that where we are. So we are at this particular place, and these are the issues that we are facing. Now the question is that where do we, let me address the second question, where do we want to go? Now when we talk about where do we want to go, definitely we should not forget and we should keep in mind the new education policy which the Government of India is very keen to implement, looking into the past performance of our traditional education that has been going on all these years. So when the question comes as to where do we want to go, maybe we should know as to what exactly is the expectation of the higher education for this 21st century, and to take these youth ahead and make them the leaders of this country to carry out the activities in a very robust manner. So therefore, at the society level, maybe we must enable the development of an enlightened, social, conscious, knowledgeable and skilled nation. This is what the new education policy expects, that we should have a robust country, a robust nation, which should be competent enough to face all the challenges, address all the major problems, and come out with the appropriate answers to these questions. And that type of a skilled nation is expected today. Now to have this type of a nation, the expectation for today is that we should be in a position to deliver high quality higher education with equity and inclusion. Underline the words with equity and inclusion. There shouldn't be separation of the society. Every strata of the society should be included in this higher education campaigning, what we are trying to do, so as to build up a complete man, so as to develop a full personality who would be competent enough to take the decisions and guide this country in the right path. So the aim is to develop good, thoughtful, well-rounded and creative individual with multi-skilling. Today, no industry accepts with one or two skills in the individual graduate. They expect that we should have multi-skilling. What is this multi-skilling? The multi-skilling, when we talk about the multi-skilling, hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
So this, when we are talking about a multi-skilling, what type of an individual should be there, that he should be or she should be a good analyzer with a good analytical bent of mind, and this particular individual should be an expert decision maker and an innovative thinker. So see, we are coming from the macro level to the micro level, that a skilled nation trying to give the best high quality education with equity and inclusion, and develop an individual with multi-skilling. Now, in terms of this, that we want to have all the characteristics in an individual. What are these characteristics? Maybe the characteristics like intellectual, aesthetic, social, moral, all these characteristics should be imbibed in this individual. This is what we expect. And finally, to conclude, where do we want to go? Maybe the bottom line. Audibility is there, na? Because here the screen is gone. Hello?
Yes, sir.
I'm
Yes,
audible.
You're audible.
Okay,
You're audible.
okay. Only because my video is not being reflected here.
No, you're visible as well as audible. No problem, sir. You continue.
Okay. So the bottom line, I would say that where do we want to go? The bottom line is more holistic and multidisciplinary education. More holistic and multidisciplinary education is the need of the hour. Now let me address the last question, how to reach where we want to go. And let me tell you, my friends, that in terms of how to reach where we want to go, there are so many paths, but I am limiting the discussion. The scope of my talk is as to we would be reaching where we want to go by simply discussing as to what are the various higher education pedagogies, so that we would be in a position to reach there by giving the best quality higher education. So in terms of the teaching pedagogies with respect to the teaching skills or the strategies, what we have given the title for my talk, that teaching strategies to motivate active learning among the students. So first, let me tell you that what are the various types of the teaching methods. Now, in terms of the various types of the teaching methods, specific methods, we'll come to it within a short while, but all these teaching methods we can classify under three major classifications. One of the major classification is the teacher-centered methods. Now, in terms of the teacher-centered methods, here, as the name itself suggests, that the teacher is at the center, the teacher is the authority, the teacher is the expert in all respects, and the teacher commands the entire authority in terms of imparting this particular knowledge. So that is basically teacher-centered methods. So in terms of the teacher-centered methods, obviously expository method would come into picture, lecture method would come into picture, and finally, it is being a teacher-centered method, we also call it as closed-ended teaching method. So in terms of the teacher-centered methods, the teacher is the authority. Then what is the role of the learner? The learner is simply a passive recipient of the knowledge. He is simply the passive recipient of the knowledge. So this is one of the major type of the teaching method, that is the teacher-centered methods. Then there is another type of a teaching method, that is learner-centered method. Now in terms of the learner-centered method, which we always talk about today, that we should go for the learner-centered methods. So in terms of the learner-centered method, here the teacher is playing dual role. He is playing the dual role. The dual role in the sense, he is a teacher as well as he is a learner. Why is he a teacher? Because he is sharing his experience. And why is he a learner? Because he is giving scope for the learner to take part in this teaching and learning process and see that something comes out from the learner side also. Therefore, he is also learning as a teacher. Even today, maybe after 37, 38 years, when I engage a class, and even today, I learn something new from a given class. So this learning is a lifelong learning situation. Therefore, learning-centered method, here the teacher is playing the dual role of teaching as well as learning. So with regard to this particular learning, obviously discussion method is one of the methods of teaching specific method in terms of learner-centered. Then similarly, demonstration is another method of learning. and collaborative learning. These are some of the specific methods. We will come to it in terms of the learning centered method. So teacher-centered method, teacher is the main crux of it. In learning, maybe the teacher is playing the dual role. And there is the third type of teaching method which we classify, and that is the content-focused method. Now, in terms of this content-focused method, I would also call it as programmed learning. Now, in respect of the content-focused method, here the contents are already being pre-decided, and having been pre-decided, neither the teacher nor the learner can criticize this particular content-focused method, nor he has the authority to revise or to change or to modify the content-focused method, because the content is already being pre-decided. Having been pre-decided, only thing is that you have to decide upon as to what pedagogy will you use, so that this particular content is taught in a particular rigid, you call it, or in a very static manner, that in a programmed manner, step 1, step 2, step 3, you have to go chronologically according to that. And that is the only way which has been specified. Or you can say that it is foolproof method, proven method, which is being adopted in terms of teaching learning process, that is content focused, wherein you try to simply focus on the given content. And out of these three teaching types, teacher-centered, learner-centered, and content-focused method, follows certain bits are being taken from all these, and there comes into existence the fourth method, that is interactive or say participative method. So these are the various types of the teaching methods. Now, in terms of these various types of teaching methods, let us come to the specific teaching methods. Now, with regard to the specific teaching methods, what are the various specific teaching methods? And then what specifications that we should follow? What should be the do's and don'ts? And when is it required, or under what circumstances this particular specific method has its significance? That we will try to explore in terms of these various specific teaching methods. Then we come to the strategies. The first method, which has been going on for generations together, is obviously the lecture method. Now, in terms of this particular lecture method, this lecture method is oral presentation. The teacher is teaching. The teacher is talking. The learner is learning. The learner is listening. Here, the teacher is talking and the learner is simply listening. So therefore, in terms of the lecture method, the recipient is playing a passive role. Now the question comes, maybe Baba, is this lecture method is really a right pedagogy to give the quality knowledge to the students? Of course, if you ask me, personally, my opinion is, after experimenting with 3.5 decades teaching pedagogy methods, and even very recently going on with this webinar method or online teaching method, maybe I would finally come to one conclusion, that the chalk and the talk method is one of the best methods, wherein you are in a position to gauge whether the learner is learning in the right perspective or not. The rest of the other methods, there is a lot of distancing, and maybe we are not competent enough to find out the validity of the knowledge that we are imparting in terms of the other different method. So the lecture method. Now the question is this lecture method really useful? If it is useful, the question is when. So there, I would like to say that if the learner has no knowledge at all about a given concept which you are trying to teach, under such circumstances, I would say that when the learner has no knowledge about anything about the concept, and there you are trying to give your knowledge, under that circumstances, because he doesn't possess any knowledge, everything what you are starting and trying to teach him is from the scratch. Under such circumstances, even today, lecture method is one of the best method for a novice learner who is learning for the first time or who is trying to acquire some knowledge for the first time, who doesn't have any prior knowledge. I would say that this lecture method or this lecturing strategy is of significance even today. Then, now the question is, how can we make this particular lecture method very effective? Why? Because you engage a lecture maybe for 40 minutes, 50 minutes or 60 minutes. Here the question that arises, whether your lecture is really effective, whether the student is really learning. How can you make this lecture very effective? Because the holding attention of a listener, as per the research finding, is maximum 15 minutes. I would say you can stretch up to the best lecture up to 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, the span of listening, the span of interest starts declining. So how can you make it very effective? So here, to make it very effective, maybe for this particular 60 minutes, you can have a break of 3 different parts, and for each part, maybe once you start explaining, after 15-16 minutes, maybe you need to switch over your monologue, because you are going on telling and telling and telling certain things, and the listener gets bogged down because it becomes monotonous for him to keep on listening to one particular individual. Therefore, maybe at the 16th or 17th minute, you need to switch over to a little different change in terms of this particular concept. Say some concept, some definition, some characteristics, something you are teaching. There, immediately, you should switch over to some analogical examples. You should make some humorous talk. You should put the listener at ease, so that what happens, the boredom will come down. And then maybe 2-3 minutes, when you go with some illustrations, when you go with some problems, or when you go with some humorous talk, there the attention would again go up. So in this way, maybe at some regular intervals, maybe you need to change your talk. You need to change your style of lecturing method. Then maybe this would become very effective. Otherwise, it would become a lousy talk. So these are some of the precautions that you have to take under the lecture method. Now, what are the basic principles of this lecture method? The basic principles of this lecture method is going from known to unknown, simple to complex, and from parts to the whole. That means, now suppose when you are lecturing, you go on giving simple concepts of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and finally in the end, you come out with a model of all these concepts, and that is the whole that you are, where all the parts are being put into a whole through the lecture method. So this is one of the specific teaching methods which is being adopted, or maybe the strategy that you adopt for making the higher education equality one. Then, now in case of this, you want to make some effectiveness, you want to have some efficacy in your teaching pedagogies and this specific teaching method. So can we switch over to some other method? Yes, obviously you can think of going in for another method, that is the discussion method. Now in terms of the discussion method, here what the teacher is not only talking, but at the same time he is also listening. Now as he is listening, he is giving an opportunity for the learner to share some of his experiences. Say for example, if you are interested in training the safety methods in a corporate world, so when you want to talk about the safety methods or the safety practices at the workplace, maybe I would say that discussion method would be more appropriate. Why? Because all those who have been working in a given situation, and to make this workplace a very safe workplace for the health of the employees, and when you go for a discussion method, each of their employees or each of the participants in this discussion would share his or her experiences, and having shared their different experiences, maybe you come across a long list of the precautionary measures or the safety measures, and because of exchange of ideas, exchange of opinions would lead to generation of many ideas. And this generation of all these ideas, you can club together, put to it, and then finally you can conclude, yes, today's discussion in terms of these safety measures, maybe that this is the consensus that we have come to, that we need to do these things. This is the demonstration method, where you have an exchange of experiences by which the teacher and the taught are exchanging the ideas and the opinions, and then the discussion method becomes very lively. Along with that, maybe we can let us not put all these in watertight compartment methods, but only thing is, for understanding purpose, we have been talking about these specific methods, but we have to go for permutations and combinations of this. Then you have a third specific method of teaching, and that is the demonstration method. Now suppose you want to basically for the what do you call as professionals, where you want to show or exhibit some of the real life situations under which what we call as the proverb goes, seeing is believing. So in order to make the learner to see certain things, maybe you would go in for the demonstration method. And basically, as we all know, for the physical sciences and all, where the experiments are being demonstrated in the labs. Similarly, today we have so many labs, that is the management labs, even in management sciences, that we have different types of labs. So we take the learner to these labs and then we demonstrate them all the real life situations. And under demonstration, what you try to do is you try to exhibit that, look here, that these are the things, and along with the lecture, you try to reinforce the lecture method by demonstrating in a live manner, by which the learner or the learning process becomes very effective. So this is about the demonstration method. Now in terms of the demonstration method, say for instance, under social sciences, the disaster management. Now in terms of a disaster management, what is disaster management, how, when, what is to be done, all these things can be talked about, but actual physical demonstration when a particular disaster takes place, how it should be done, that need to be shown to the learner. Then and only then maybe he would be in a position to rehearse it, and then that learning becomes very effective. So this is the demonstration method. Now in terms of the demonstration method, again, to make it very effective, like as we talked about in terms of the lecture method, the precautions, the discussion method, again, in terms of the discussion method, the precaution, that we should give an opportunity for the learner to make it learner-centered teaching method. Similarly, we have to take a precaution that when you go for a demonstration, first of all, you as an individual who is trying to teach something, you should rehearse this particular demonstration. Otherwise, if you go with overconfidence and maybe you directly start the demonstration, and if you fail in exhibiting your demonstration, and that becomes a very poor show. So therefore, what is the prerequisite here to make it very effective, your demonstration method, is that you need to rehearse it. Now, okay, you have done the rehearsal. Having done the rehearsal, when you are demonstrating, maybe certain things would go wrong. Certain things may go hairy-fairy. So there you need to foresee, you need to forecast that, okay, what are the chances that these things might occur, so that I have a standby arrangement immediately to switch over, rather than the demonstration method would curtail or it would stop there and then. Like for example, before I started with this particular one, I asked all my colleagues that what would happen if all of a sudden the electricity fails? What would happen if all of a sudden the audibility is gone? So in this way, the precautions has to be taken, that what is the likely chances of breakdown of certain things in terms of this demonstration. These precautions one has to take, then maybe your demonstration would be very effective method of teaching. Then the buzz groups. there is another specific method that is called as a buzz groups. Now, what is this buzz groups? Buzz means noise. So here, say for instance, that you have certain discussion to be made, and this particular discussion goes for a very pretty long time. Now, if it is going for a pretty long time, and there the learning has to be very effective, maybe lecture would get boring, discussion would create a lot of confusion, demonstration is not possible. So there what we do, you break the group into small groups. And having broken the groups into small groups, then for each group you give a question. That look here, this is the problem. Now, how do we come out of this particular problem? What is the solution for this problem? You tell us. So then these small groups would discuss among themselves. And there you would find in this buzz group that a lot of noise would occur in the initial stages in the hall, where each group would be talking among themselves. There would be a cross talk, so on and so forth. So along with this buzzing going on, after some time, maybe you should alert all these groups and say that, look here, all this time we have been discussing, all of you have been discussing. Now you please select one of the leader from each of your groups, and this leader, whatever that you have discussed for the last 15, 20, 30 minutes, would come and make a presentation as to what solution that they have come out with, or what is the solution of this particular problem that we are today addressing. In this way, maybe from each of these buzz groups, one of the orator, one of the leader would come forward, and then he would share the discussion that has taken place among themselves, and then he would put it before the others. Under such situation, what happens? Each group would be listening to the other, and having listened to one another, there you would come across plenty of ideas from each group coming out. Like this, all the groups ideas put together, maybe you can play the role of a facilitator, not as a teacher, and as a role of a facilitator for all these buzz groups you combine, or you put under different heads that these are the solutions, these are the alternatives for these solutions, this is the best solution as you people have come out, and maybe that would be the most refined method for a given situation, for a given type of a teaching. This is about the buzz groups. Similarly, suppose if you want to extract innovative, creative, new ideas. So there is another method of, I would say, exactly not teaching, but it is one of the technique, I would say, which goes hand in hand with the teaching, that you demonstrate, or you lecture, you give a lecture, or you have a discussion, and then you come to this particular technique, which would be the part and parcel of one of the specific teaching method, and that is the brainstorming method. Now, in terms of a brainstorming method, what is done here is the prime objective is to extract new ideas, creative ideas. Many times what happens, the most creative ideas are deeply buried at the back of our mind in the what do you call as the human brain, which has the ego and the super ego. The layers of this brain, some of the ideas are hidden at the bottom of the brain. Now, to extract these ideas, maybe Alex Osborne has identified this particular technique, what is called as the brainstorming technique. Now, in terms of the brainstorming technique, maybe the learner is given the problem beforehand, maybe 24 hours before, and he is asked to come prepared for the class with the ideas, having given thought over this particular problem. And when all these members assemble together, then the brainstorming starts. Now, as the brainstorming starts, the major principle that is followed here, free wheeling of ideas. I repeat, free wheeling of ideas. Nowhere you should obstruct or put the brake or apply the brakes to the ideas that is coming forward. The ideas keep on flowing, and you go on noting down the ideas. And here, another principle, along with these creative ideas to be extracted, is the vulgar the idea, the more it is appreciated. This is what is told, but exactly in the dictionary meaning, vulgarity means it should not be vulgar in nature. The vulgar the idea in the sense that there should be free wheeling of ideas to come out. So therefore, maybe whatever the idea has been given by one participant, banking on this particular idea, maybe the other would give some refined idea. So this is the basic principle that is followed in terms of the brainstorming teaching method, wherein you give an opportunity to some of the, there are so many individuals who are really creative, but unfortunately in our teaching process that we don't experiment with this brainstorming method, and maybe somewhere out of curiosity in my life career, I have experimented with these brainstorming techniques for our MBA students, and there I have really come across some of the fantastic innovative ideas as the discussion was pertaining to the business administration or the marketing topics. Such sessions were carried out, and I tell you that this has really given very good results so far, the experiments that what I have personally carried out. So brainstorming to extract creative ideas. Then there is another method, specific method to make the learning have an experience, and at the same time the individual, when he is experiencing, he should also develop empathy towards others. With this objective, there is another specific method, what is called as the role play method. Now in terms of the role play method, what you are asking the participants is to play a particular role by giving a particular incident. And here the participants are playing the role, and after the role is being played, maybe by 2 or 3 or 4 groups, and then you comment upon it, and finally you come to the conclusion. Now in terms of this role play, say for instance that you want to talk about the sales skills. Suppose you want to talk about the selling skills, or you want to teach negotiation skills. Now when you want to teach these negotiation skills or the selling skills, now these skills cannot be demonstrated by you as an individual in the class. So what you do indirectly, you ask the participants or the students to come forward, and then you give a situation that yes, 2 of you or 3 of you go for a negotiation for such and such situation. And then the role play starts. After the role play starts, that you keep on listening and you are a very keen observer and allow them to play the role. And having played the roles, and then finally you conclude that in terms of these roles, which one was the more scientific one and who has done what. And each of these individuals, in terms of this particular role playing method, what they develop is that number one, the confidence is developed. First thing is, in terms of the role play, we have seen to it, we have forced the students to play the role in the classroom, and after playing the role, they have developed the confidence, and the students' feedback is that, sir, let us have such type of role plays for the rest of the curriculum. Don't go for any lecture method or teaching. You go for the role play. This was the reaction of the learners in terms of the role play. Basically, the confidence is developed, and most of the students, they lack confidence in terms of putting forward some of the ideas. So once this role play takes place, they themselves will realize as to when I am playing a particular role, how tense I am, what is the amount of stress on my mind, and finally how did I play the role. And ultimately, when I was playing the role, all others, without any criticism or commenting or cross-talking, they were listening to me. So this thinking or the thought process, when it comes in your mind, automatically you start developing empathy towards others. This is one of the major contribution of role play method: confidence building and developing empathy towards the others. So once you develop the empathy towards others, then you will be a good listener. So once you are a good listener, you listen, you talk, and there comes the exchange of ideas, thoughts, and the verbatim, the words, the communication, the conversation becomes very healthy, and ultimately it boils down to a healthy learning climate with these different specific methods. And last, of course, but not the least one, is the seminar method, where in terms of the seminar method, as we all are acquainted with, that you give a particular topic to an individual and ask him to prepare and come and then make a presentation. And having made a presentation, that maybe some of the doubts and the questions that we have. We try to answer these doubts and the queries, and finally we conclude the entire seminar. Like this, certain courses are being taught without going in for either lecture method or discussion or any of these above methods, but there you follow a seminar method, and each individual with this seminar method, all others would learn different individuals being given different topics, and all these topics, each one of us would share the ideas by collecting the literature and the content from different sources, and we share our ideas before the learners, and in this way the joint learning would take place. And these are some of the specific methods which I wanted to share with you. And finally, once again, the bottom line of these specific teaching methods is it should be whatever the teaching that you want to do, it should be learner-centered teaching. Why? Because today's student expects that, look here, I am paying the fees for my learning process, so therefore I should get what I want, not that what you enforce upon me to do only and only this. So today's era is cafeteria approach. So under cafeteria approach, when you go to a cafeteria as a client, you go on demanding by seeing the menu card. The same way, today's student's expectation is that he wants the menu of his choice, not of your choice. So therefore, you have to be very cautious and see that the quality higher education is imparted to these students through this cafeteria approach and with student-centered learning process or the method. Now, the last but one part of our discussion is the strategies. What are the strategies to facilitate active learning? There is a concept, facilitated learning. What is this facilitated learning? Facilitated learning is, it has the assumption or the premise of facilitated learning is that the learner takes the responsibility, the learner holds the responsibility on his shoulders to learn majority of the things on his own, so that the learning process becomes very effective. The learner takes the responsibility on his own. He is responsible for most of the learning by which he is interested in, or for whatever he is interested in. And that is basically facilitated learning method. Now, in terms of this facilitated learning, there are certain strategies that you should use along with these specific methods. Please remember, don't isolate all these things. This should be maybe in an integrated manner that we have to go ahead with it. So then, the entire learning process becomes very effective. So what are the strategies that we can follow? Maybe in terms of right from lecture method to the seminar method, that what I have put before you right now. So one of the strategy is the student involvement in learning task. Students' involvement in the learning task. Now, what are the learning tasks? Let me put it in the other way. What are the teaching tasks for a teacher? Number one, what is the curriculum that I have to teach? Then, where do I get this literature for this curriculum? So, you go for content collection. You try to have access to this content. Now, having had the content, curriculum, content, having had the content, now to deliver this content, what parallel analogical examples I should give. So you go for the collection of the examples. Having had the examples, then you pose some questions so as to know whether the learner has learned what you intend to teach him. What are the questions that you should pose? And finally, what is the answer that you get to these questions? And you try to summarize. Maybe these are some of the 5 to 6 learning tasks, or you call it as a teaching task. Okay. Now, in terms of this, under lecture method, try to recollect, try to imagine that under lecture method, you as a teacher, what are you doing? All these teaching tasks are being shouldered by you. You are taking care of the syllabus, content, examples, questions, giving the solutions, and finally summarizing, and then saying in the next class we will talk about this, and you just walk out of the class. This is the activities that is being carried out by a teacher under lecture method. What we suggest is that one of the strategy is you don't do this entire task from A to Z. Maybe you start with the syllabi, you give the content, you give the examples, and then you give a solution to one or two examples, and finally you ask the students to give the summary of this particular lecture or this particular topic. So you are assigning one of the tasks to the learner, so which he feels that this is my learning task to summarize. So you ask him, please give 3 important principles of today's learning, whatever that you have learned. So immediately he starts scratching his head and then he starts thinking. So the moment when he starts thinking, the involvement of the learner takes place. So once his involvement is there in the learning, so there the learning becomes effective, or he gets involved and he starts paying attention towards what exactly I am learning. So instead of you entirely summing up, you give maybe the tail end part to this particular learner to do the concluding part. Then I will tell you that the involvement of the learner would go on increasing. This is one of the strategies, simple strategy. Some of the learning tasks you assign them to carry out. Similarly, you give an opportunity to discover the student. When I'm saying that you give an opportunity for the student to discover some of the learning activities, means what? You are telling. What are you doing? When you are delivering a lecture, I would call it you are telling. So as you go on telling and telling and telling, what are you telling? What is to be done? When it is to be done? How it is to be done? Who is to do? And finally, what is the outcome? You are going on telling and telling and telling. Now, maybe one of the best strategy, you reduce your telling. Of course, with precaution, I'm telling you this. When I say that reduce your telling, in the sense that you don't do any homework and everything you try to put it on the shoulders of the students, then obviously the student would, when he cross questions you, that saying that, sir, as you have asked us to carry out this particular activity, and when I'm trying to, as a scavenger, I'm trying to find out some of the literature pertaining to this particular syllabus, I'm not getting the literature anywhere. I've scavenged the entire library, I've ransacked the entire library, but nowhere I could get this literature. When he says that, then you have to be prepared to tell him the accessibility of this particular literature. So therefore, maybe if you are adopting this method of reducing your telling and giving some responsibility to the student to carry out the scavenger's job, there you yourself should be well equipped with all these activities, my friends, please remember. Now, simply don't put it on their shoulders without doing any homework. This is the major precaution that you have. Otherwise, you would prove to be a big fraud or a fake or a cheater. So then the student, would carry the negative image about you. So this is one of the precaution, by giving an opportunity to discover. So what is to discover? Say you give a syllabus to the student and ask him that go to the library. What is to be done? Go to the library, take this literature, and then you collect the content pertaining to this syllabus. And maybe another group would deliver the talk on this particular subject. So your telling is reduced. The student is learning as to how to find out the literature. Another group is learning as to how to make a presentation. While making a presentation, how much they perspire, they will come to know. How much sweating it takes place, they come to know. How the words get stopped, or how they struggle to find or search for the words. All these psychological barriers they will come to know. So they start discovering certain things. So this discovery from the student point of view, from the learner point of view, is very important. Why? Because whatever that you experience when you are trying to carry out one activity, and when you are making a mistake, remember, this is never forgotten lifelong. He or she remembers lifelong. So if at all discovery is to be done to the learner by making some errors or mistakes, give him an opportunity and you be there as a precautionary standby to help him out so that he remembers lifelong that I was stuck up here and then my teacher helped me out and this is how I came out of this particular problem. So this becomes a lifelong learning memory to the student by giving an opportunity to discover the learning activities. What you do, you go for less deliberation and more activity from the student point of view, from the learners. Then emphasis on instructional design. Now, more or less, it is similar to these two things what I have told, that teaching activities, the emphasis on the instructional design. So whatever the instructions that you are giving, you simply give the instructions. Ask them to carry out the process. And you be there to take care of the errors that is being committed. So, say for instance, in terms of the instructional design, okay, we have to learn this particular aspect. Now for this particular aspect, these things we should know. Maybe the definition, the characteristic part, and then some of the examples. Now for this, please do these things and come. Having done that, then come to the next step. Give the instructions for the next step. Ask them to carry out the next step. Then come to the third step. Ask them to carry out the third step. You go on giving the instructions time and again as step-by-step approach of this particular learning activities take place. So this is one of the strategy where you can use, by which you can make use of the students' intellectual level and involve them in the learning process by assigning some task on their shoulders. So definitely our experience all these years, when you give an activity to the students, let me tell you, the students has the anxiety to such an extent that he or she always expects that my teacher, who is a friend or a philosopher, should always call me and then he should give me some task. And if you give him a task, I would say that he is the happiest person on the planet, and then you just see, you experiment and just tell me afterwards that I will challenge that if you give a task, go and do this thing, the students will simply run to complete this task because they have that anxiety and eagerness. But what happens is that we have one preconceived notion. What is the preconceived notion? That these students are the first. They are good for nothing. They are useless lot. They don't have any anxiety to learn. So there is no point in giving them any task. If you give them some seminar or assignment, immediately they are absent for the next day. Now this is somewhere, maybe I would say that we are going wrong in terms of compelling them or in terms of motivating them to get involved. That is why this is happening. So we have developed this preconceived notion that the students do not do any activity. No, that is not the case. No point in blaming the students. We are playing the role of a sculpture. So when a stone is given to us, we should be in a position to carve out the best beautiful piece of artwork from that stone. So you as a sculpture should be able to get the work done from these students by giving them instructions, by asking them to shoulder some of this. And I tell you that they simply go mad when you give them. And after having done the task, allow them to carry out maximum mistakes. Don't rebuke. Immediately some of my friends, they lose their temper and they start rebuking that you're useless. What is this you have done? Hopeless, all this. No. There you try to pat his back and say that yes, you have made a very good attempt. This is one of the most psychological, my own experiential words that I am using before you, that you tell him that yes, you have made a very good attempt, you have done a very good job, but just you put, but maybe if you do it in this particular fashion, maybe the things would improve much more. So definitely that he would be highly motivated, and then he would go on doing in a refined manner. And the same student one day would come and tell you that, sir, you had given me this opportunity to do, and I have done it at that moment, and today I am one of the most successful citizens of this country, and this is what I am today because of you. And these are the words that you listen from him, and maybe that is the most pleasant event for you, as whatever the efforts that you have taken in terms of involving the students. So here today, maybe you need not keep on jabbering all the time. You go for playing a very good role, that is the facilitator role, no doubt. Don't forget, your first prime job is teacher's role. You have to be a teacher first. So you being a teacher first, do all the homework, and then simply sit quiet. Don't show that you all know all these things, but simply ask them to do it. If they stuck up, help them out, then I will tell you, you would be the best facilitator from the student's point of view, and the best involvement learning and the most healthy learning climate you would enjoy, and the students will enjoy, and the students themselves will come and tell you that, sir, you go on giving us such type of task repeatedly, we want to carry out this activity, because they enjoy doing some activities on the premises. This is my experience, and I had given the task and they have done it so jubilantly and so successfully, I have no words to appreciate or talk about it. So these are proven results I am sharing before you. Then you have a collaborative and group learning. Another strategy you can use. Okay, students' involvement in learning tasks, or you discovery may allow them to discover certain things in terms of this learning process, or you give the instructions, ask them to do it, or you have a collaborative and group learning. That means you collaborate with the students, and then you form them the groups, and you have to play the role of a leader in terms of this collaborative and group learning. These small groups, you give them, you assign them a task, break this particular activity into different subtasks, and each subgroup you give this subtask, and then finally you pay an attention or play the role as a leader, and then you see as to what are the results that is coming out, and definitely you would find enchanting results, you would find wonderful results from this by collaborative and group learning process. And along with this collaborative and group learning, maybe another strategy that you can use is working together. Now, in terms of collaborative and group learning, simply don't ask them, okay, you are the groups, you do, and then you come to me. No, your involvement has to be there. So therefore, maybe you can add one more variable to this method, and that is the working together. There, you be the monitor, along with being a leader, you be the monitor and keep on monitoring and see that you put these students on their toes and that they keep on working. So with this collaborative and group learning method, or working together with the teachers and that is the teachers and the students, would give you fantastic results. And creating, or there is another strategy, what is called as creating opportunity for crossover learning. Now, in terms of creating opportunity for crossover learning, I always remember that one of my colleague friend, the present in charge director of cyber, Dr. Dalvi, who never taught in his life the 4 P's of marketing. He tells what are these P's of marketing, and then finally he goes for crossover learning among the students. He asks the student, he gives each student one particular product, and he says, go into the market about this particular product, see how many variants are there, what are the prices, how it is being advertised, and who is selling this. So all the students, maybe the 60 students of a class, bring 60 different products, various products, prices, distribution channels, and the promotion techniques. All these things are displayed, and then he says that this is marketing mix: product, price, promotion, and distribution. What is he doing? He is simply assigning the task to the students and asking them to collect certain things. And after collecting, he is displaying. And when the entire class sees that 60 different products with so many variants, these prices, everybody comes to know what are the 60 products that are in the market, what are their prices, what advertisement, what is the punchline, everything is being learned. There is no need for him to spend maybe 48 hours or 72 hours to teach about these 4 Ps and keep on dragging and make the talk lousy too. So this is one of the strategy, what is called as creating an opportunity for crossover learning. This is called as a crossover learning. What you do, you first give a lecture in the classroom and then allow the students to go informally collect all this information, or to have the cross verification. You ask them to have some observation, get the observation sheet and share in the class, or learn something, take the experience, come and tell in the class as to what are the various experiences. So this is creating an opportunity for crossover learning. First you tell the concept in the class, and then say for example in terms of buying behavior, I tell the students as to what are the various types of buying behavior. Then I ask them to go to a mall, and having gone to a mall or a big bazaar, and then I ask them to simply stand and watch how the customer comes before he goes out, what all physical activities he does. The students come on the next day or third day in the class and they say that sir, I have studied. So I'll ask them to narrate what I have. So then they keep on narrating that one of the customer came with the basket, he put all the things and he went out by making the payment. Another customer came and then he saw the product, he kept it back. Third customer came, he saw the product, he just twisted and turned and then he put it in the basket. The fourth customer came, he saw the product, he looked at the price and then he called the salesman at the counter, he asked him some questions and finally he put back the product. So these are the different physical movements they explain in the class. Then I tell them that this is the various types of buying behavior. No need to tell them all the concept. So some of them straight rebuy, modified rebuy, new buying, or maybe cognitive dissonance buying behavior. So different types of buying behavior, you just ask them to go and observe how the buyer is buying, automatically they're learning it. Until to maybe lifelong, they will never forget the various types of buying behavior. This is crossover learning method where you can assign the task to the students for learning. Then learning through argument. Ask the students that yes, I have clarified this particular concept. Now you please argue on this. So learning by argument also paves its way for so many ideas, for so many issues. And then finally, you get some of the novel ideas. And you, as a teacher, is not a dead end there for you for learning. You also keep on learning so many new things. And then you refresh all your knowledge. So that is learning through argument. And basically, learning through argument takes place among the mathematicians and the statisticians, as well as the scientists, in terms of the scientific inventions or the discoveries that has been made. There you have this argumentation, where you argue when you work upon some medicine, or what about the efficacy of this particular medicine, so on and so forth. So that is learning through argument. Maybe you can inculcate this habit among the learner that look here, you should not be a passive listener when I am telling you, don't consider everything what I am telling is holistic. I always tell my students that because I am bald enough and then I have 35 years of experience, don't consider whatever I am telling you by standing on this platform, everything is holistic. No, you should have the habit of asking the question that, sir, you said like this, I disagree with you, I would appreciate it. So you should develop a climate of argumentation in the class, and there the argument becomes very healthy. But of course, with these strategies has to be adopted with utmost precaution. Remember, otherwise, maybe all these strategies would not give the results as we expect. So with certain precaution, and of course, all these precautions would come automatically out of your experience, sheer experience, nothing else. Then the context-based learning. As I have already told you, the content-focused method, there you have this context-based learning strategy. In terms of the context-based lesson, you just find out as what we say as the case method of teaching. You give a case, give a context, give a small case, give a problem, and ask the students, come on, share in the class as to under a given situation with these constraints and with these alternatives, what would you do? So in this is a context-based strategy where you give some reference, you give a situation, tell what is the situation, and then ask them that this is a problem, how would you come out of the problem, how would you solve this problem? That is context-based approach is one of the another good strategy. Then the adaptive teaching. Now this is one of the most challenging method or the challenging strategy for a real teacher who is interested in teaching in the best manner. So what is this adaptive teaching? That adaptive teaching means, please remember, all learners are not uniform. All learners are not uniform. All learners are different. Now, since the learners are different, but tell me, my friends, that what is your teaching content? Teaching content is one. For different learners, you don't have different teaching content. You have one teaching content, but learners are different. So when learners are different, teaching content is one. All different learners would not learn at one stretch the same thing or what you want to teach. For some of the learners, this may be too primary. Advanced learners, what content you are giving, that must be too primary. For some learners, this may be okay, I enjoyed. For some learners, what you have taught, I don't know anything, I have not understood anything. So you may come across these stratas of learners because your teaching content is one. So under this situation, the strategy what you can adopt is adaptive teaching and learning. Now what is this adaptive teaching and learning? Okay, you go for this teaching process, you adopt a strategy that in the first instance, how many of them are the advanced learners, how many of them are slow learners, and how many of them have not understood anything. Then you think of modifying your strategy and then upgrading your teaching, lower down your pedagogy, and for the slow learners, you think of adopting certain techniques and then see that they learn. And this is one of the strategy what is called as adaptive teaching. The teacher has to be very adaptive in order to see that all the learners have understood. But all learners do not learn at the first juncture, in the first instance. So there you can think of this particular strategy. So over a period of time, you come to know that as the batches go on coming, as the learners go on coming, maybe in the first instance, by seeing at the audience, you can gauge that as to what is the composition of this group. And then what strategy you have to adopt in terms of delivering your session. And analytics, maybe another strategy that you can use is analytics of emotions. Today we talk about business analysis. We talk about business analytics. In the same way, the teacher also has to be an analytical one. He has to have an analytical bent of mind. That is, when you are teaching, there you need to keep your conscience open and you need to have your eye contact, see that the emotions of the students, cognitive response of the students, cognitive dissonance of the students has to be gauged in this learning process. And then maybe you are in a position to know that through the eye contact, some students have understood, some students have not understood. Through some frustration or frustrated body language, you would understand that some of the troubleshooters who are trying to shoot trouble at me, they are not learning properly or they are not enjoying. So in this way, with some emotional analytics, make use of emotional analytics, look into the eyes of the students or the learners, try to poke them, and then you try to understand what is their learning, whether they have learned or not. So through this analytics of emotions also, you can understand or you can develop a strategy of learning. Now to come to the last part and to conclude, since I have 5 minutes to conclude for my session, as it has been 12 o'clock, what is given to me, the time, maybe there are certain prerequisites or there are certain qualities that the teacher should possess. And I expect all my teacher friends or all those who make their career in academics or in this teaching profession should have these qualities, and I would just tell you these qualities one by one within 5 minutes, and then I will conclude. So the first quality of a teacher is adaptability. You should be adaptable as well as you should be adaptive. So if you want to be adaptable, please look with the nature and see how the nature adapts to the given situation. You have to be adaptable. If you are rigid in your teaching pedagogy, if you are rigid in your value system, if you are rigid in the knowledge what you have acquired and no entertaining any other things, then this will not give proper results. So adaptability is one of the most important attributes. Then the passion. No Tom, Dick and Harry can think of making his or her career in teaching. In academics, teaching is not a simple job. If at all, you need to teach a student very effectively and see that everything is digested, you have to struggle hard. And this struggling hard will come only and only if you have a passion for teaching, otherwise not. So along with adaptability, you have to have a passion for teaching. So this passion will automatically lead to the struggle, and the struggle would give the positive results, and then you would be rated as one of the best teacher. Then in-depth knowledge. The question. The student may throw any question at any time. You should be well prepared. If you say that, let the class be over, you ask me afterwards, then you are a poor teacher. You have to have in-depth knowledge. Passion, your adaptability, and your knowledge should be thorough. You should be a voracious reader. You have to be a voracious reader. Read a lot. You have to update your knowledge. Then only maybe you will be able to face the music. Otherwise, you will make a fun of yourself. Then the preparation. 37 years have passed. Even till today, if you ask me to go to the class and deliver a lecture, I would never muster my courage to enter the class without preparation. No. At any cost, no. I go only and only when I am prepared. So therefore, as a teacher, your preparation should be thorough and you should always be prepared. Now, don't be under overconfidence that you are the only social animal on this planet who possesses all the knowledge, not others. Don't think that you are second to none. No. In terms of knowledge, everyone possesses the knowledge. Someone would be much brighter than you. So therefore, our simple job is to acquire knowledge, have in-depth knowledge, and be prepared or go to the class prepared by organizing your talk, what I should talk today, what analogies I should give, how should I hold the attention of the student, think on these lines, and then they go to the class. This is the preparation. Then communication. Now in terms of the communication, let me tell you, 80% of your performance is gauged on the basis of your communication. Your communication with the learner should be so polished that the learner should really be flabbergasted with your talk. He should be really anxious to know as to what comes next from your mouth. So each and every word that you express should be so heavy that he or she should be able to understand, digest, simple, and then finally, yes, who would admire that, yeah, I've really heard something new and which has really pleased me. So your communication, your kinesics, your body language, 70% of your total communication is through your kinesics. Your kinesics should not show some dull gestures. So the teacher is the one who would inspire the learner to learn. If the teacher himself is dull, the learner is dull. If the teacher is inspired, the learner will automatically get inspired. So your communication has to be polished communication, and one should be able to, one should be eager to know what next comes. Then you should keep engaged to the learner. So when you are trying to teach it, or when you are trying to express something with him, when you are communicating with another person, at the same time, you should keep your ears open to see that whether the emotional analytics says that he or she wants to say something. So you should be able to listen also. Listening is also one of the skill. Most of the teachers don't have the listening skill because, there is a proverb that if talking is silver, listening is gold. If talking is silver, listening is gold. This is one of the Turkish proverb, which said, so therefore, listening skills should also be there with the teacher. So unless until you are a good listener, you won't be able to impart properly. Then patience. We have to be patient. Carrying to the classroom all the time, high BP, with high blood pressure, maybe you won't be able to do justice to your profession. So you have to be a very patient listener. You have to be patient to understand what is going on, and then maybe you go ahead with your further activities. Friendliness and approachability. I told you earlier that every student has an expectation that you should be a friend with the student. You should be a philosopher, guide to him. Of course, when I say friend, doesn't mean that you put your hand on his shoulders and then you take him to some hotel or restaurant and throw some parties to him, or you call him to the house and give him the parties. No, not necessary. Suppose if your talk is the best, automatically, the friendliness will come. No need to go for such cheap publicity tactics. No. Your knowledge and the way you deal with the student and what you give to the student will automatically bring that closeness and friendliness and approachability. The student will approach without hesitation. Then the feedback and self-reflection. Always, after you finish the class, after you finish anything that you are trying to teach.
Sir, sorry to interrupt. Please possible wind up the session.
Finish.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
feedback
Thank you.
and the self-reflection. You need to always take the feedback and see as to how you are performing. And finally, you are a teacher. Please keep on learning. There has to be constant lifelong learning. So these are some of the characteristic features that you as a teacher should possess. So I hope sharp at 12 o'clock, 10:30 I started, and I'm stopping here. And once again, I would like to thank to all the listeners for the patient listening for this 90 minutes, maybe the punishment that has been given to you by the organizers. So thank you. Any questions, 5 minutes, if the organizers give the permission to
Yes, sir.
share some question and answers. Otherwise,
Sir, thank you very much for excellent sessions, sir, on teaching strategies. So now I request participants, if at all they have any questions, so next 5 minutes we can have for question answer session. So participants, if you have any question, you can just put your questions, you unmute yourself and then ask question, or put your questions in chat box. Yes. Sir, there is one question. Ali sir, there is one question I had found in chat box.
okay.
So the question is about, please elaborate more about lab method.
Lab method.
Management lab
Yeah.
and its variables. Okay.
Yes. Now, what is this management lab? Maybe in the management lab, we take the students, and then there are certain management games. Of course, that physically I cannot show you right now here, but I would explain that there are management games which we have in our management lab, and each management game teaches certain concepts. Okay, so you ask the students to carry out these activities. Don't forget the main issue, what you are trying to teach. Yes, I'm trying to teach him that setting goals. Okay, how you should set the goals, or say for example, identifying my own strengths and weaknesses. This you want to teach to the student through management lab. So we take them in the management lab, and we ask them to maybe throw a ring by putting some objects a little far away, bring those objects closer. Like this, there are various activities that anybody would get the information. Today, the information is accessible to everyone. So in this management lab, we take the group of students, ask them to carry out the activity, and when they carry out the activity, we note down the results as to how they have performed. And on the basis of the results that they perform, we link those results to their actual concept, and tell them that look here, that you have come up to this level, you have come up to this level. We rate them, we map the activity actually, and then we tell them or try to correlate with the concept. So what happens that this student, when he is performing this particular management game, then he is playing the game, enjoying the game, and at the same time correlating with the concept what we are trying to teach him. It gives fantastic results. In the management lab, you need to equip the management lab with management games. But please remember, you have to do lot of homework to know what is this management game. When you are playing this management game, when you are playing in a particular fashion, or when you complete the management game, as what is the outcome of this game, that you should be able to correlate with the concept what you want to teach. So like this, we have plenty of management games in our management lab at Vasant Patil Institute of Management, and we bring the students and ask them, like throwing the ball, throwing the ring, and then there are some dice. There are some dice. All these are short-term, long-term goals deciding. So these are the games. It gives fantastic results.
Okay, sir, one more question we can take from chat.
Yeah.
One more last question, because now time is running and it's already
Yeah, yeah.
12:08. So one more last question.
Yes.
How do question develop student cognitive abilities?
How does question develop cognitive ability?
Students' cognitive abilities.
How do questions develop students' cognitive ability? Yes. You give a question, you put a question before the student. Okay? Having put a question to the student, you ask him for the answer. If he is giving the answer instantly, there and then, and that answer satisfies you, say 80% and above, then you can close your eyes, rate that individual as highly cognitive learner, because he has immediate presence of mind, his memory, retention and recall is very strong. The answer to the question what you have posed has given instantly. So therefore you can consider that he is cognitively, very strong. Say another student who is struggling to get an answer, maybe this is one of the method of gauging instantly. So there, if he is struggling to get an answer or till the last, he doesn't give an answer. Maybe he is aware, he is not aware, he is able to express, not able to express, whatever may be the situation. But finally, this entire thing boils down to cognitive skill. When your cognitive skills are sharpened, then the confidence will come in, expressing power comes in, communication strength comes in, maybe then adjustability comes in. All these traits, intellectual, aestheticness, social ability, all these abilities will automatically come based on the cognitive skills. So questioning the students and making him think and allowing him to discover certain things which are hidden from him will strengthen his cognitive ability.
Yes, right, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think with this,
Yes, sir.
I would like to now propose vote of thanks. So far as today's session on teaching strategies, Dr. Ali sir is concerned, he has started throwing light on higher education system, whereas he has mentioned about the student enrollment, the situation of employability of graduates, then how, so far as accreditation bodies are concerned, their statistics about accreditation of colleges, then how in institutions there is a dearth of interdisciplinary courses, how that is important in present day situation. So universities, institutions, they should come up with some interdisciplinary courses. And he has specifically pointed out that how we all are good in dissemination of knowledge, but falling short so far as developing knowledge is concerned. That is, we are falling short so far as research is concerned, because we all know that so far as research is concerned, it is a knowledge addition process, and our Indian system, faculties, teachers, they are falling short of short in developing research knowledge, and there are various reasons why they are not coming forward for research and all. Then he has put up one important question for us, that is how to reach where we want to go and what are the various teaching pedagogies. So in the process of uh, discussion on various pedagogies, he talked about higher education system in our country. And so far as education is concerned, we all know education is nothing but is a process of developing entire personality of an individual. And in the process of developing entire personality of a student or individual, what uh, types of teaching should be adopted, right from teacher-centered, learner-centered, contact-focused, interactive, participative teaching types, followed by, he has thrown light on various teaching methods like lecture method, discussion method, demonstration method, buzz groups method, then how technique of brainstorming teacher can use for teaching subject to the students in the class, along with how role play is also very important, seminar method. So all such teaching methods uh, should be learner centered teaching, uh, and in such teaching methods, how even cafeteria approach is important. Then after that, he talked about what should be the strategy so far as facilitative learning is concerned, because in teaching strategy, student involvement is very important, and uh, by involving student, uh, involvement learning process will be improved. Then he has explained that how other no process, learning process like collaborative group, uh, and in the process of uh, learning, how teacher would be playing important role as a facilitator through monitoring. So and at the end, uh, Ali sir rightly mentioned that what are the important qualities of teachers, right from adaptability, in-depth knowledge, passionate, communication skill, listening skill, all such qualities teachers should possess, uh, and how they are important so far as teacher is concerned. So I would not like to take much time. So
Yes,
I would
Umesh,
yes, yes, sir.
Umesh,
Yeah,
I would like to congratulate the entire team for organizing this webinar talk, and special thanks to you for for coordinating this activity. Well,
yeah.
uh,
So,
please
so
keep it up.
yes,
All
sir.
the
Yes,
best.
sir. So I
All
would
the
like
best.
to thank, on behalf of organizing committee, I would like to thank Dr. Ali sir for spending his valuable time and delivering session, fantastic, excellent session on teaching strategies and how these teaching strategies facilitate active learning. So for this, once again, I would like to thank you, sir, and hope that in future also we can have such kind of association with our institute, as you are not new to us, you are our colleague, and hope that you will be associated in future. assignments also. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
So with this.